on Goblin Reddit. Today's story is...
My son treated his ex. When I confronted him, he told me he despises me for using his college money to support his baby. 4 years ago, I met my current husband, Finn, and we got married. I have a 19-year-old son named Ross from my previous marriage. He is currently studying at university. My first marriage was to John, Ross' biological father, who was extremely abusive. I was very young when I met him, and our relationship was a nightmare from the start. John was a classic narcissist who always put his needs first and used manipulation to keep me under his control. At first, I didn't see the warning signs. I was too naive to realize what was happening. He initially captivated me, made me feel special, and completely dazzled me. It felt like love, but in reality it was an elaborate trap. When I became pregnant with Ross, everything changed dramatically. John used my pregnancy as a way of reinforcing his control over me. He saw my vulnerable situation as an opportunity to keep me by his side and under his domination. He bombarded me with expressions of love, showering me with affection, gifts, and attention, but it was all simply a way of manipulating me. Every time I tried to leave or defend myself, he used guilt tactics to make me stay. He convinced me that I needed him and that leaving would hurt my baby. I was scared, confused, and completely overwhelmed, so when he pressured me to get married, I agreed. I thought it might improve our situation, but in reality it was the biggest mistake of my life. What followed was 12 years of an incredibly toxic relationship. He constantly belittled me, made me feel insignificant, and destroyed my confidence bit by bit. I felt like I was walking on eggshells every day. John had this way of distorting everything to make it seem like it was my fault. Every problem, every mistake, every argument, he demeaned me as a person, both in private and in front of others, and treated me as if I were worthless. Living with him was truly a nightmare. He had a temper that could flare up over the smallest things, and it was impossible to reason with him when he was angry. John couldn't keep a job because of his confrontational personality and his constant need to clash with coworkers or superiors. That just added more pressure to my life because I had to manage to make ends meet. On top of that, he was extremely jealous. He accused me of things I had never done, questioned my every move, and tried to control who I spoke to or spent time with. Gradually, he isolated me from the people closest to me. He created a distance between my close friends and my family and me. He cut me off from the support I desperately needed. To this day, I deeply regret not leaving him earlier. Sometimes I think about all those years I spent trying to make things work, hoping the situation would change, but it never got better. I stayed much longer than I should have, and I paid a very high price for it. When I finally found the courage to leave him, I knew it had to be for good. I moved far, far away with Ross to start over in a city where John couldn't find us. Fortunately, I was granted full custody of my son, which was the only thing that really mattered to me. Although the court ordered John to pay child support, he never fulfilled that obligation. Honestly, I didn't care about the money. All I wanted was to keep my son safe and build a life where we could be free from John's shadow. Once we were away from my ex, it was as if an enormous weight had been lifted from our shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt like we could breathe freely. I knew that life as a single mother wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to give Ross the life he deserved. I took on several jobs, working long hours to make ends meet, but every effort was worth it. I wanted Ross to grow up feeling loved and supported, and I made sure to provide him with opportunities that I never had in my youth. When I met Finn, I honestly didn't think anything serious would come of our encounter. He was an incredibly charming, financially stable man who seemed to have his life perfectly organized. A stark contrast to my reality as a struggling single mother. I was juggling work, bills, and raising Ross on my own. I didn't think someone like Finn would have any real interest in someone like me, but I agreed to go on a date with him because a mutual friend insisted we would be a great match. To my surprise, the date went wonderfully well. Finn was very easy to talk to, warm and attentive, but even as I said goodbye that night, I didn't allow myself to get my hopes up. I thought it would be a one-off and that he would move on, leaving me with nothing but a good memory. After all, why would someone with his lifestyle, his financial prosperity, and his success want to keep dating someone like me? But Finn completely surprised me. Not only did he call me again, but he showed a genuine interest in my life and who I was as a person. We started going on more dates, and gradually I found myself falling in love with him. What really melted my heart was how excited he was about meeting Ross. Finn seemed genuinely interested in getting to know my son. When they finally met, it was like a huge weight was lifted off my shoulders because they got on extraordinarily well. Seeing Ross and Finn laugh and connect so easily was an immense relief. And it made me realize that Finn wasn't just someone I could imagine a future with. He was also someone who could be a wonderful father figure for Ross. When Finn and I decided to get married, it wasn't just because I loved him deeply, but also because I saw how much he cared for my son and how naturally he took on the role of stepfather. Every day since our wedding, Finn has shown how kind, supportive, and considerate he is. He constantly strives to make me feel valued, and he is always there for Ross, whether offering advice, sharing moments of joy, or being present at important moments in his life. I feel incredibly lucky to have him as my husband and as a father figure for Ross. That said, things haven't been perfect. Although Ross has fully accepted Finn and respects him as if he were his own father, I have noticed changes in my son that sometimes leave me with mixed feelings. Finn is extremely wealthy, and after we got married, he made it clear that he enjoys spending his money on us. He showers us with gifts, designer clothes, the latest technological devices, and everything we could possibly want. Finn also loves to take us on luxurious vacations to exotic places, the kind of trips I could only dream of before. I admit it, I too enjoy these comforts, who wouldn't? But my upbringing has left me with certain values that are difficult to abandon. I grew up learning to stretch every dollar, save money whenever possible, and never take anything for granted. Even after marrying Finn, I can't help but maintain those habits. I still use coupons, compare prices, and think twice before buying something expensive. Ross, on the other hand, has embraced this new lifestyle without any hesitation. He is living the kind of life that I could never have provided for him on my own. And although I am happy that he is finally getting everything he has ever wanted, sometimes I worry that he is becoming a bit spoiled and has started to expect only the best from life. And although I don't want to diminish his happiness, there are times when I feel that he is losing touch with the values that I worked so hard to instill in him. For example, on his 18th birthday, Ross insisted on buying a high-end luxury car for himself. A car that cost more than I had earned in a whole year as a single mother. I immediately refused. It was too extravagant and unnecessary, and I didn't feel that an 18-year-old needed such a vehicle. But Ross was not willing to take no for an answer. Instead of respecting my decision, he went straight to Finn and asked him to buy the car. Finn, being as generous as he is, gave in to Ross's request thinking it would make him happy. I didn't want to start a conflict, so I reluctantly agreed, hoping Ross would appreciate such a significant gift and act responsibly. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The same night Ross received the car, he went out with friends to celebrate at a club, consumed far more alcohol than he could handle, and ended up crashing the car on the way home. I was terrified when I found out, grateful that no one was seriously injured, but devastated that Ross had been so reckless. He was arrested that night, and although he did not serve time in prison, he had to complete community service as part of his sentence. What struck me most, however, was not the accident or even the arrest. It was Ross's attitude afterwards. He showed no real remorse for what had happened. He dismissed it as if it wasn't important, blaming bad luck rather than his bad decisions. This incident was a wake-up call for me, but it didn't seem to change anything in Ross's outlook. Since then, his spending habits have become excessive. Finn and I gave him a credit card for his monthly expenses, with a set limit to cover necessities and some occasional extras. But Ross constantly exceeds those limits. He spends thousands of dollars every month on new video games, expensive watches, and other unnecessary luxuries. When his card reaches its limit, he comes to us asking for more, often pressuring Finn to top up the account. Finn finds it difficult to deny him anything, and I feel trapped in the middle trying to set limits that Ross simply does not respect. What hurts me the most, however, is how his behavior towards others has changed. Ross used to be a kind and considerate person, someone who respected everyone regardless of their background or profession. I raised him to treat people kindly no matter their circumstances. But over the past 2 years, I have noticed a worrying change. He has become derogatory, and even rude to people he considers inferior to him. For example, every time we go out to eat, he treats the waiters badly in restaurants, acting as if they are not worth his time. He raises his voice at them for the smallest mistakes and does not even bother to say please or thank you. At home, he is equally disrespectful to our domestic staff, treating them as if they were invisible or worse, as if they were only there to serve him. Finn and I have tried to talk to him about it. We have explained to him how important it is to treat everyone with dignity, regardless of their job or social position. But Ross refuses to take us seriously. He dismisses our concerns, saying that it is not important how he talks to working-class people and that the people in those jobs signed up for it, as if that justified his behavior. It has been heartbreaking to witness this side of him. This is not the Ross I raised. I do not recognize this arrogant and dismissive young man who seems to have forgotten the difficulties we went through together. To make matters worse, I have also noticed that Ross dates a lot of girls. He is always involved with someone new. About 4 months ago, he introduced me to a girl named Carly. She was blonde, sweet, and had a quiet confidence that set her apart. Of all the girlfriends Ross has introduced me to, Carly was the one who left a lasting impression. She seemed intelligent, kind, and down to earth, someone who genuinely cared about my son. I had hoped that maybe this time, Ross had found someone who could help him settle down, someone who could bring out the best in him. Unfortunately, not even 2 months later, Ross and Carly ended their relationship, and when I asked why, I found out it was because Ross had been unfaithful to her. I was disappointed, but not completely surprised, given his recent pattern of behavior. Even after their breakup, Carly and I remained connected on social media. From time to time, she would like or comment on my posts, and I appreciated these small interactions. She seemed like a genuinely good person, and I was saddened by how things had ended between her and Ross. This brings us to the present. Earlier this week, Carly contacted me directly, sending me a message asking if we could meet in person because she had something important to tell me. Her message conveyed a sense of urgency that piqued my curiosity. She also specifically asked me not to mention anything about this meeting to Ross. Carly explained that only after meeting with me could she decide whether or not to talk to my son about it. I was intrigued and a little concerned. What could she possibly need to tell me that required this level of secrecy? I agreed to meet with her, and 3 days ago we sat down together for the first time since she and Ross had broken up. Carly looked visibly nervous as she began to explain that she is pregnant and Ross is the father. Apparently, she had taken several pregnancy tests last month and confirmed that she was expecting a baby. She told me that she had already informed Ross about the situation, but he was absolutely refusing to accept his responsibility. As Carly spoke, tears welled up in her eyes, and she explained that she had never been someone to casually date or have intimate relationships with just anyone. Ross was the only man she had been with in a long time, and she had genuinely loved him. She admitted how devastated she was when she discovered that he had been unfaithful to her, but even then, she never imagined that she would end up pregnant after their breakup. Carly went on to reveal that Ross had been pressuring her to have an abortion. Her voice trembled as she explained how torn she felt, caught between what my son wanted and what her own heart and beliefs were telling her. Carly comes from a deeply religious background, and for her, abortion was not something she could easily consider. She told me how scared she was, not only of the decision itself, but of the pressure Ross had been putting on her to have it. What hurt me the most was hearing how my son had been treating her. According to Carly, Ross had called her self-interested and other cruel names, accusing her of trying to trap him with a baby. He even gave her an ultimatum. Either she ended the pregnancy, or she kept the baby, but she could never count on him for financial, emotional, or any other kind of support. He made it clear that if she chose to have a child, he would completely disengage from the situation. I was speechless. I couldn't believe the harshness of Ross's words and actions. This was not the son I thought I had raised. I had taught him to take responsibility for his actions, to be kind and respectful to others, and to always treat people with empathy. But listening to Carly's story made me realize how far he had strayed from those values. With tears streaming down her face, Carly explained why she had come to me for help. She confessed that she couldn't have an abortion, but she didn't know how to raise a baby on her own either. She admitted that she didn't have the financial means to support a child, and her family, once they found out about her pregnancy, would probably reject her. She was terrified of being forced to give up the baby, and the thought of her child ending up in foster care or being raised by strangers broke her heart. It was then that Carly said something that took me completely by surprise. She asked me if I would adopt the baby. She explained that she was willing to give up the child and hand over full custody to me if I was willing to take on that responsibility. Carly said she was even willing to never be in the child's life if it meant avoiding causing more confusion or instability. All she wanted was for the baby to grow up in a safe and loving environment, and she firmly believed that my husband Finn and I could provide that. "I know it's a lot to ask," she said, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her face. "But I know you're a good person. I saw how much you care about your son. I know you'd care about this baby too." I sat there in shock trying to process everything she had just told me. My heart broke for her as I listened to her words. Part of me wanted to immediately say yes and reassure Carly that her baby would be safe and loved no matter what. But another part of me was overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was asking. Adopting a baby is a completely life-changing decision, one that would affect not only me and Finn, but also Ross. I knew exactly what she was going through as a woman. I could see that she genuinely cared about her unborn child, and she was even willing to give him up just so that he could have a good life with us. I gently but firmly asked her to forget everything for a moment. I told her to think only about herself and her baby, and I asked her the most important question of all. "What do you really want?" Carly admitted that she wished her pregnancy had happened under different circumstances, at a better time in her life when she was more prepared. "Although it's not how I imagined it," she said with a firm voice and conviction. "I've come to accept it. I've accepted that this is happening, and now I'm okay with it. If it were up to me, and if circumstances were different, I would keep this baby. I already love it." Hearing this, I felt a lump in my throat. I told Carly that I needed time to think, time to talk to my husband Finn, and most importantly, time to confront my son. So yesterday Finn and I confronted Ross about the situation. At first my son tried to deny everything, but I told him that I had already met with Carly, that he had seen the pregnancy tests, and that he had heard her full story. At that point his denial collapsed and he changed tack. He began to blame Carly for the pregnancy, saying that it was her responsibility to take precautions. She should have been using contraception, he argued, as if that absolved him of any responsibility. I felt my indignation rising, but I kept my voice steady and calm. "Ross," I said, "it takes two people to create a child. You can't just transfer all the blame to her. You are as responsible for what happened as Carly." Ross sneered, his tone dripping with indifference. "I want nothing to do with that child. She's trying to trap me on purpose. Honestly, why can't they just pay Carly some money to shut up or something? Women today are only concerned with money anyway. She probably got pregnant on purpose just to get a share of our fortune." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My son, the child I had raised, fought for and loved with every fiber of my being, was suggesting that I should bribe Carly to terminate her pregnancy as if it were nothing important. He was talking so matter-of-factly, as if Carly had somehow got pregnant on her own, as if he had played no part in the situation. My son continued to refer to Carly in terms that I don't want to repeat here. Hearing this, a deep and burning indignation welled up inside me, one that I couldn't contain. Before I realized what I was doing, I slapped Ross hard across the face. The room fell silent. Ross stared at me with wide, speechless eyes, holding his cheek in disbelief. Even Finn, who had been trying to reason with him moments before, stood motionless, not knowing what to say. "You have no right to call yourself a man," I said, looking him directly in the eye. "A real man takes responsibility for his actions. A real man doesn't run away from his mistakes or blame someone else for his choices. A real man certainly doesn't treat the mother of his child as if she were worthless." Ross opened his mouth as if to protest, but I raised a hand to stop him. "I understand if you don't want to have children," I continued, my voice firming. "But that conversation is over. It doesn't matter anymore because guess what? You're going to be a father whether you like it or not. Maybe you should have thought about that before and taken precautions if you weren't ready for the consequences." My son's face turned bright red. The shame and anger were evident in his expression. He opened and closed his mouth repeatedly, struggling to form a response. Before he could say anything, my husband, who had remained silent and thoughtful throughout my confrontation, finally spoke. "Ross," he said, "your mother is right. Carly has made it clear that she wants to keep this baby, and that is her choice. It's her body. It's not up to you or anyone else to tell her what to do with it. If you don't want to be involved in this child's life, that's one thing. But trying to pressure her into doing something she doesn't want to do is not only wrong. It's extremely cruel. It's time for you to grow up and face the consequences of your actions." Since then, my son has refused to speak to us. He claims that we are wrong for what we have said, accusing us of trying to force him to become a father. He insists that by supporting Carly's decision, we are somehow betraying him and turning him against us. So tell me, am I the problem? Update 1. In answer to some of the most frequently asked questions, yes, we will definitely carry out a paternity test to confirm that the child is Ross's. But honestly, I really believe in Carly. I feel terrible for her. She's a young woman who never expected her life to take this turn. And although I understand that Ross might feel conflicted or unsure, I can't ignore the reality of Carly's situation. To anyone who is worried about her, don't be. I know exactly how it feels to be a single mother, so I will do everything in my power to help her. I am very familiar with the difficulties of raising a child without support, as raising Ross on my own without his father's help was not easy at all. I had to make countless sacrifices, and I understand what it means to put your child's needs above your own. Carly is now in a similar position, and I will not allow her to feel that she is alone in this. I am by her side, and I will make sure that she feels supported and safe throughout this process. No, I am not pressuring Ross to marry Carly or try to resume their relationship. I would never try to force him into something he doesn't want. However, what I do expect from him is responsibility and accountability. Carly didn't get pregnant by herself. Ross was as much a part of the situation as she was. Even if he doesn't want to raise the child or be part of its life, the least he can do is show some respect and kindness towards Carly. She is going through a lot of emotional, physical, and mental changes, and he has a duty to recognize that as a decent human being. For now, Finn and I plan to talk to a lawyer and explore our options. We need to determine what is best for everyone involved, especially the baby. Update 2. It's been several months since my last update, and I've been extremely busy. For those who are still following the story, I wanted to update you. Carly gave birth this week. Unfortunately, her parents refused to come and be with her in the delivery room, which really broke my heart. But I was there holding her hand, offering her my support, and making sure she wasn't alone at such an important moment. It wasn't easy for her, but I'm proud of how strong she was throughout the whole experience. After the baby was born, the first thing we did was to carry out a paternity test, and it turns out that my son is indeed the father. Honestly, I didn't even feel that a test was necessary because the baby looks so much like Ross when he was a newborn. The resemblance is undeniable. However, it was something of a surreal experience to hold my grandson in my arms and know that this little one is part of our family despite the complicated circumstances. Anyway, I have now invited Carly to live in my house, and she is currently recovering while breastfeeding her baby. Finn and I are helping her look after the little one. Ross, as expected, has not even contacted her and has refused to come and meet his son. But you know what? Finn and I are not going to chase him to make him fulfill his responsibility. He has made it clear that he doesn't want to be involved in this, and we are not going to force him to step forward if he doesn't want to. We have let him make his decision, and we are focusing on what is best for Carly and the baby now. If Ross ever changes his mind, we will handle the situation then, but for now, we are moving forward without his participation. Furthermore, Carly has decided to keep the baby, and we have agreed to help her every step of the way. She can stay with us for as long as she wants, as her family has basically rejected her and refuses to accept her in her current condition. Finn and I are genuinely happy to have her and the baby with us. Yes, it has been overwhelming at times, but when I look at that little face, it makes it all worthwhile. Carly and the baby are part of our family now. Now, as for the child support payment, we have decided to use some of the money we had set aside for Ross's college education to cover the support of his son. As you can imagine, Ross is furious about this and feels it is unfair. We are using his reserve college fund, He argues that there won't be enough money left to fund the rest of his college years, but I have made it clear to him that if that is the case, then he can get a student loan and work to pay it off on his own. My son needs to understand that the world does not revolve around him and that life is not always fair. Update 3. Wow, I see a lot of comments on my post after my recent update. I have noticed that many of you agree with my decision to use Ross College Fund to cover child support payments. I did this to teach my son responsibility. However, Ross told me directly that I have changed since I remarried and that he now despises me just because I am paying child support to Carly from his college funds. Those words hurt more than I would like to admit. Hearing your child, the person you have raised with love and dedication, say something like that is deeply painful. So I replied directly, "You know what? You've changed too. The son I raised would have been kinder to his ex and would have shown more consideration for his own son. We have never asked you to help Carly or the baby, and we are certainly not forcing you to get involved. But paying child support is the legally and morally right thing to do. If you have a problem with that, then it is something you must resolve on your own. You can despise me. You can hate me. But as a woman and as a mother, I will never abandon Carly and my grandson as you have done." I'm sure this conversation didn't change anything at the time. But I hope that one day Ross will understand that this is about teaching him a fundamental lesson about responsibility and accountability. It's something he desperately needs to learn. But right now, he's just angry with us and refuses to see things from our perspective.